Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's October 26, 2020. The time is 2:05 p.m. and I'm broadcasting here from the state capital of California, Sacramento. And with us today is the lovely and intelligent Lena to give us an update on her recent activity concerning 5G activism. Most of you have seen her in other contexts, so I won't go into her biography, but if you want to share a little bit of information, Lena, about how you got into this incredible movement and how you made these important strides on the behalf of humanity, you might take a couple of minutes to talk about that before you launch into the meat of the program. So, Lena,
Absolutely.
I throw it to you.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you for having me on your show. I want to share with the audience first my website. You can find me at lenasfabulousfrequencies.com. And it's plural, lenasfabulousfrequencies.com. And you can enter through my website a Patreon site where I'm offering documents that are of a legal nature that anyone who's interested in taking down the cabal would be a very powerful tool to have. I can start sharing my a little bit of my history, how I even got into the activism is my background is in landscape architecture. I got a degree at UC Davis, and that's how I met Daryl, is through our association through the university. And I've been living in Northern California for a very long time, since the 1990s. And so I've seen California develop for these last 30 years. And just within these last 30 years, so much has changed. And I have to say that California really is a center of global change. And we'll go into that much, much deeper. In fact, I believe between Daryl and myself, we'll be talking about the historical changes that is the epicenter starting from California that radiates to the rest of the world. And we can delve into the science, the technology. I mean, this is the hub of a lot of the R&D that we are seeing today. And it's pretty massive. So we're very excited to be here to start off this episodic interviews that we're going to really dig deep. So anyways, back to my history. I got my degree in landscape architecture precisely because I've always had my heart in the environment. As a child, I was always aware of my natural surrounding. I was one of those kind of natural girls who let their hair down. I hated wearing dresses because I like to climb trees. I didn't like wearing shoes, that kind of thing. I was a real country girl. In fact, I was actually raised in the South. And I basically had a huge, the whole landscape was my playground. So it was a very exciting childhood I grew up with. And I basically brought that type of experience, life experience, love of nature into my work today. And so now I'm fighting the whole 5G, even though it's really part of this encompassing problem that we're facing. But the reason why I focus on that is because it's the tool of the cabal in bringing down humanity. So it's been probably 10 years of education, 10 years of study of environmental science, of the EMFs, and the effect it has on the environment as well as biology that has brought me here today, that our Earth is in a lot of danger if we don't take action.
Now, Lena, you speak of 5G as being a tool specifically of the cabal. So could you help us understand what the cabal is, who they are, a little bit of how they function, And before we end this, and perhaps we have to take it over into another episode, what we can, this is the important part, what we can do to take down the cabal, how we can grapple with them, how we can neutralize them. Because I'm not doing this just for fun and for entertainment. I'm dead serious about engaging these individuals so that we can recover our humanity. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be bothering with this. And I do think we have a unique opportunity, I would say even a responsibility to engage the enemy. So let's begin. Who or what, because I'm assuming it's a sentient entity that might not be for all we know, but
Yeah.
who, what is the cabal?
Oh boy. Let's start from the beginning of time. Dark and light, evil and good. I would have to say it starts off with entities. It starts off with a spiritual darkness that somehow landed on our planet, our Earth here, and made its quote unquote home. Maybe was forced to live here. There's a lot of narratives out there. I have a Christian background, so my narrative is I have a pretty um I have my ideas, but the end game really is the same. The end game is we can all agree that these are dark forces, no matter what type of religion you're from. If you're the type of religion that's obviously not the Luciferian type satanic religions, we're talking about Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, Catholicism. There's always a story between the light and the dark, evil and good. So when we're talking about where did this cabal come from, or why, everyone always wonders the here and now, right? Why is the government doing this to us? Why are we so suppressed? Why can't we find solutions? Well, that's because much of our government is wrapped up with the cabal, and the cabal essentially is a handful of very powerful families. These powerful families, if you dig into their religion, you will find that dark spirit, that dark agenda, and whom they follow, their cult leaders, or even their religion, always stems back to, it just stems back to the beginning of time. And what's interesting is that these families are so tight knit with each other. Their secrets are embedded in Egyptian history. It dates back to the pharaohs. It dates back to time before them. And so we have to get out of this constrained mindset in the here and now. And when we think about the cabal and the families, we have to link them in with their histories. And you, Daryl, you're very well aware of the whole historical significance and timeline of where this cabal came from.
Mhm.
So,
If I may interject,
yes.
I believe my signal contribution is to help balance, that is, help correct the lopsidedness of our understanding of this dark history that you're speaking of, that most likely originated in what we call the Near East, right?
Mhm.
Babylon, Sumeria. That's fairly clear. It could be documented through archaeological record, as well as through any number of disciplines that have determined this. But what I'm bringing to this, and this is why I've even decided to start doing this type of work publicly, is because there's been except among specialists, there's been a utter neglect of the Central Asian and the Asian contribution, good, bad, or ugly, to this larger cabal process. And for the first time, the average American and even the so-called independent thinker, the researcher, is beginning to see how China articulates with this larger system. In that great masterwork of Fritz Springmeier, right? Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Cisco Wheeler and Fritz Springmeier. There's only one bloodline that he talks about that's Asian, and he doesn't even talk about any central. And of course, he doesn't claim that the book is comprehensive, but he only talks about the Li family, as in Li Ka-shing,
Mhm.
who most people have never heard of, but he's a very, very powerful individual. He might even be behind this current imbroglio,
Yeah.
to put it lightly, involving the Biden criminal family. But we have these people, these yahoos, just talking about the chat coms this, talking in their ching chong language.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that is not getting us anywhere. It's frustrating and it's dangerous.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Lena, you as a person of Asian background, and
Mhm.
let's get it straight from the beginning. You were born in the USA, correct?
Yes. In the South,
In the South,
in the
the
Bible
Bible
Belt
Belt.
South.
The Bible Belt. I myself is a third generation American. All right. Just so people know where our loyalties are. Because even now, I find myself being questioned, whereas you have Canadian subjects who get a pass.
Mhm.
It might have to do with their racial identity. I hate to say that. Right.
Right. Well,
But
we may look
so
Asian, but we're American born and we're American patriots through and through.
that's
Absolutely.
right. At the same time, we are reaching out to the larger Asian community globally
Yeah.
because where sovereignty and nationality are important and citizenship are key and crucial to maintaining our sovereignty. I think it's very, very important that we bring in the larger trans-Pacific
Yeah.
perspectives here. It's important for our survival, economic survival, cultural, we know that, but also intelligence. What happens if you have a bunch of people who are still going off 1960s and 50s red Chinese movies in popular culture, and even now coming out of Hollywood? You have adventure and action movies set in China, in Asia, in the Pacific, but there are
Well,
no
that,
Asian
that's
Pacific
why
people in
they
it.
well, that's why they deliberately truncate us from the Russian news as well as the Chinese news. I mean, it's a complete blackout between us and them. If you look at China, they block all information, all media sources from the US and vice versa. We don't get very much communication from the Chinese inside the country. We're only getting snippets of what the Americans are telling us as if they know what's going on in China. I don't think they really are. Obviously, they're not, because if they're talking about the Chicons the way you're saying, they're obviously ignorant or they're limited hangout.
Oh, okay.
We've got a whole half world of people here that has information we're not tapping into and their historical significance in relationship with the rest of the cabal. These families, these handful of families that are in control of the whole world, has control over China as well. And if you're talking
Hmm.
about the Lee family, they are in communication with the other families in Europe,
Hmm.
in Russia, everywhere, in Australia, in the Five
Sure.
Eyes, in all the countries, because
Central Asia.
in Central Asia. And basically what I always tell people now in almost every interview now from my research, on a practical level, they actually have us all wrapped up. We've been in a new world order for a very long time. So don't think that China's going to start a war or Russia's going to start a war. The Cold War happened and ended. The Berlin Wall came and went. Those separate issues are not separate. They've been creating these narratives to make us think that we still are a sovereign nation. We haven't been operating as a sovereign nation for a very long time. We have a US Constitution and Bill of Rights that we, as citizens, actually I should not use the word citizen, should men and women here residing on the landmass known as America, United States, we're not exercising our sovereignty. We're not exercising these rights that have been given to us actually from our creator. It was God inspired, Bible inspired, written word into a beautiful, the highest level constitution language you can ever find on this earth. We've been gifted this. And today we've lost it. You know, our children, this generation completely have no sense of borders. They've their minds have been so brainwashed into borderless everything, borderless gender, borderless country, borderless money, and a borderless environment. So we're talking about climate change. That's Greta Thunberg's narrative. That's completely the opposite of what we really should be doing. So the children are being brainwashed into this conglomerate idea that anything goes or nothing is what it is. It's muddling
Mm.
the defining borders.
Now, keeping in line with your ideas of this borderlessness, I see something similar happening on at the biophysical level. Our bodies ourselves, the
Yeah.
boundaries have been violated
Mhm.
externally through criminal activity, but also at the cellular level.
Well, that's thanks
The,
to the
the,
transhumanist movement. And the
the
transhumanist
containers
movement,
are the vessel, as it used to be called, is being broken itself.
yes,
Our minds are being broken down through this borderlessness.
absolutely. In fact,
So
our DNA is going to
could
be
you tell us
invaded.
about the biophysical breakdown?
Oh, well, that's where the 5G comes in. In fact, it's all the Gs. When people say 5G, it really incorporates 4G, 3G, 2G. So I don't want to get too much in the technical aspects, but when we talk about 5G, we're talking about the entire microwave spectrum of 3,000 frequencies that don't belong on Earth. And these microwaves obviously penetrate your body, and it impacts every system in your body. And what it does, it can change your DNA. It's basically electronic CRISPR. If anyone's familiar with CRISPR technology, CRISPR's um, is so simple to use now. They can actually sell it to you online, and you can purchase it, and you can change your DNA just from injecting some kind of a chemical vial. And who knows what it does, but what it does absolutely is that it violates your your God-given information structure, your very DNA. So so when we're talking about 5G, okay, and you've got all these waves forms in the air, and it's passing through your body. What it's doing is there's so many layers of problems that's happening. And it's basically one of the actions is breaking down your cell structure, the membranes, and it's causing chemical to pass back and forth within the cells. And that's also called electroporation. And what it
Electro.
electroporation,
Okay.
it's when electricity or magnetic fields or electromagnetic fields weakens the cell membrane. And when it does that, there's holes between the lipids that gets created, and chemicals get within the cells, then leak out. And this is likened to the voltage gated calcium channel leaks that Martin Pall always talks about. But it goes much more beyond that, in that you're also releasing other chemicals within the cell that's healthy, that's keeping the cell healthy. And you're also bringing in chemicals that do not belong in the cell, that's outside the cell, into the cell. So there's a really imbalanced chemical exchange, molecular exchange. So when, let's say, this is why I've been also fighting against the whole vaccination program, especially now since they're introducing the RNA vaccine that's changing the RNA, is that when you expose yourself to 5G frequencies and this electroporation is happening, it's going to facilitate the synergistic movement of the RNA vaccine faster and more and deeper into your cells. It's the catalyst. It's the physical catalyst that's enabling the RNA vaccine to to electrically interject into your cells. So this is the synergistic programming that they've designed. People see things again separately, like, oh, this is 5G, this is vaccines. They don't see these two things as meant to happen together. Why else do you think they're infusing our entire earth with all these vaccines, EMFs, and then simultaneously, enforcing the vaccines on a global scale?
If I may interrupt, you're saying they're complementary and they're being rolled out at the same time to
Yes,
work in concert?
yes, they're working in concert. Um, there's not, there hasn't been such a quantum leap in exposures to the EMFs until they introduced 5G. There hasn't been a quantum leap in terms of the vaccine technology until recently. They're coinciding in introduction, literally hand in hand. 2020, they introduced the ID 2020, which is the vaccine / chipping ID. That is going to happen in concert with the whole 5G rollout, with a satellite in space rollout. They've been rolling out the satellites, but they're not turning it on until the year 2020. In fact, Elon Musk is planning on turning it on as a pilot test sometime near the end of this year. In fact, it could be going on any moment now. And right now, he's slating it to happen up in Northern America and Canada. Actually, really close to where we are. So we're talking about the entire upper part of the United States and all of Canada. He's going to be turning on all the satellites really quickly now. And also simultaneously, they've been building up the internment camps in Canada like mad. And it's actually freaking out everyone. Everyone's focused on the internment camps, but no one's aware that Elon Musk is turning on the satellites. My thinking is, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. And in fact, I mean, everything is so nefarious that I'm compelled to tell the truth as I see it and perceive it, that they never do anything singular. Everything, when they do separate activities, these all activities are not singular. They're meshed somehow. And I think the reason why they're building these internment camps isn't necessarily about the vaccines. It's about people going crazy from the satellite exposures. They're not going to be able to get away from it. It's beaming from space, and it's going to
What do
be
you mean?
covering the
What do you mean
entire land.
crazy? What do you mean crazy? That's a global.
I know. That's a very unscientific word. People lose their minds. EMF exposures, bottom line, can cause people to lose their minds. At very low levels, it causes depression. At very high levels, if you're exposed to it long enough and the duration is the power and all that is enough, it causes depression, anxiety, leading to suicide. This is actually documented in a lot of scientific papers. And Martin Pall actually talks about this. He talks about depression as being one of the main causes of EMF exposure, microwave.
Spell his name for me, please.
Martin Pall, Pall.
And what is his nationality?
He's based in the United States. He's a PhD professor at, I believe, the University of Washington.
So his bona fides are impeccable. You've read
Oh, yeah.
his
Oh, yes.
articles.
He's been studying this for a very long time.
Where are you getting this information about the concentration camps in the Commonwealth of Canada?
From the Canadians themselves.
You're in contact with Canadian
Absolutely.
subjects who are reporting
Absolutely.
to you on this.
Yep. I have an international network of people, and these people are part of my notice of liability education, and these groups of people report directly what's happening within their country. I'm
To
getting it
you.
straight from the people. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's take this moment then, and we can return to this at another episode because I know it's a very deep and involved process. But could you give us an overview of what you're doing with these concerned people of the planet? It doesn't matter what nationality. We're being attacked by these different vectors, and are only now beginning to become aware of it. What is that NOL process that you alluded to? What does that involve? What does it stand for? What is an NOL?
Notice of liability, it's basically standing on your own 2 feet, not and taking your affidavit of truth, making a claim, stating that there's harm, injury that is either happening or potential to happen to you, that is trespassing you, your body, or your living space, your dwelling, and taking your affidavit of truth and presenting it to the other person who's performing the action that is damaging and causing injury, which means that's all your government officials. Also, it could be industry, but we we need to narrow the respondents down and the people who are the perpetrators down to a reasonable grouping of individuals. And this action basically pulls out the individual from hiding behind an agency or an organization and making them liable, making them personally responsible, personally liable. They can't hide behind an organization, which is a dead entity. And so this contract, this notice of liability, is a conditional acceptance contract, is a counter contract to what the cabal has um, already contracted with us without our knowing. And even if we are knowing, no one's really taking action, or no one really understands how to take action. So this notice of liability is a process. It's not just about a document. It's about learning your personal rights. It's about exercising your sovereignty in a legal fashion without using lawyers. It's about taking the lawyer out of the equation, taking responsibility for yourself, and holding other people accountable, holding these leaders accountable, these leaders who have sworn an oath of office accountable.
Mm-hmm. Now, the concept sounds convincing and compelling. And most of us are frustrated with the legal juridical approaches. We see more often than not. Well, it's a fact. Attorneys work for the bar, not for their client. That's where they swear their allegiance. We know all that. Can you give me some concrete examples how this notice of liability has been operationalized?
The first time the NOL was launched, in specific with any type of wireless agenda, was with the smart meters. And there have been success stories where people have used the notice of liability and they successfully had their meters taken off or prevented the meters from being installed. So that was kind of the pilot beginnings of the use of this notice of liability. And I've actually been lucky enough where a lot of people approached me and said, Lena, I've actually used this document. I've created my own document and I've used it against, for my own purposes. And they're various purposes. And I can go into more about how you apply the whole process, and how all mankind really need to learn how to do this and how important it is. But these individuals who came to me and told me their success stories have really emboldened me in knowing that this process can work, it will work, and it has to work because it is the only thing that we have. If it is the only thing that we have and we're not exercising it, it's a hidden tool designed hidden tool, designed to be hidden tool, then tells me that this is something powerful. So I've been working on this these documents specific to the 5G Internet of Everything. However, this process specific is something everyone should learn, utilize for themselves because it is so powerful. When you put your truth in an affidavit form and you have 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, you have created your own court. You have already started your legal process because you have a claim, you have conditional acceptance, and you have your affidavit, you've notarized, and or 3 witnesses. So you have these steps, to create this document, and each element of that document brings power to it. So it's actually a very simple process that people can really, educate themselves on rather quickly. And
But when you say it's a court, is that a court in the metaphorical sense, like the so-called court of public opinion, or is it binding? Does it
it's
really hold
binding.
these people accountable? Please explain that.
Okay, so in the biblical times, when you had someone who was sinning or causing harm, it's incumbent of the brother or sister to approach that person who's causing harm and say, hey, you're causing harm. Can you please stop this? Because it's damaging to us or it's damaging to yourself. It's just not good. We need you to stop. And if they don't stop, then you bring in 2 witnesses. That right there is enough as a definitive decision that this person needs to stop. In the olden days, they didn't have, courthouses, they didn't have judges, they didn't have necessarily all those things. What they had were witnesses. So that and who was the judge was God. And so when a man swears to another man, they didn't need witnesses. Between those 2 men, that sworn oath was sealed by God. If they broke their oath, the the result was death. This is how serious it was.
Yeah.
A man's word. A man's word in the biblical days was a sealed deal. They didn't need to go through any government court legal blah 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 system. It was simply a man with giving the word, his word, to another man. If he broke his word, he could be killed.
He could be struck dead.
He could be, yes, and it would be lawful. In the eyes of God, it would be lawful. And you will see these stories repeated time and time again when a man gives his word and something happens and he has to fulfill his promise. He does. He fulfills it as best as he can because he knew the consequences would be death. What are we doing now? We have these yahoos standing as actors in quote unquote agencies that is a dead entity playing
What do you mean
God.
what do you mean dead entity?
These corporations is so when we attack an agency, this is why the notice of liability is so important, so vital to breaking the spell that we are all under, is that the government creates all these agencies. Well, the government itself, the United States, is actually a commercial entity. There's commercial code attached to the United States of America, and so underneath that, all the other corporations have a code. We're all codified. Even our birth certificate is codified. We're part of this whole system. But I won't go into that here. But the whole idea is that by codifying us, we've removed ourselves as living men and women. We've entered into the world of the dead. These are all dead realms. The
Oh my
corporations and
gosh.
agencies are all dead realms. This is why we can't kill anything. It's like, this is why we can't kill the evil, because we're in the matrix. We're in their matrix. We are literally in their matrix. We've been operating in their matrix. And this is why I say we've always been operating as a one world government,
Mhm.
is because they've already been codified. Everything's
And the
been numbered.
modern corporation outlives any one individual.
Right.
It's
That's what they say.
immortal. It's been immortalized.
And we need to break ourselves out of it. We need to realize that that's all a mirage. The organization is a mirage, and they're hiding behind it. So when we pull out these individuals dragging and kicking and screaming and showing them our affidavit of truth, that's the sword of truth. Understand that your words operate like a sword. It's very biblical, the sword of truth. And when God spoke, he spoke, and the world became. So
Well, Lady Justice wields a sword. Is that not true? The
there
statue?
you go. There you go.
So that lends credence to your approach, which
Yes.
it sounds, well, it does not just sound, it is metaphysical
Yes,
at bottom,
absolutely.
but it guides human everyday life and intercourse, social, economic, cultural intercourse even.
Yes.
But
And I
we've
think
built
when
all these
people,
different layers, all
yes,
these sediments have just piled on. It's time to dredge,
yeah,
or as the president says, or the first lady, drain the
train,
swamp.
exactly.
Keep,
And
keep going.
once
I'm
you train
sorry.
it,
It's just very exciting what you're telling me here. But
oh, sure, thank you. It is. It is. It's finally, something empowering
well,
because it's
what do
the truth.
your the people you're in correspondence with? What kind of reception are they getting? What type of response are they getting to
Oh,
this definitive action that you're taking?
they're not getting any response, and we did get one response from an attorney general, and it was basically a non-response letter. Um, so we knew that they wouldn't respond because, for one, they're not honorable. They've never been honorable. They haven't been acting in honor, and so we're not surprised they're not responding. But that's okay. As long as they've been served, they're responsible adults. And if they can't rebut any of the affidavit points, then the affidavit becomes true and therefore law. So that's what we're trying to establish, is we're just reestablishing the truth in words.
So their non-response is really part of your strategy.
Yes, because
Okay,
silence is acquiescence.
on their
We've
part.
been silent this whole time. We've been acquiescing. We've
Mhm.
been acquiescing to these dead entities, these corporations who create the laws, their legal construct. Okay, so we keep fighting the system through their laws. I'm like, no, no, you know what? We need to just stop even recognizing these organizations as an organization with any authority. That's the basis of my NOL. My NOL actually dismantles the authority of these so-called organizations.
Well, the sociologist Max Weber called it legitimation.
Mm-hmm.
You're questioning the very legitimacy of these man-made institutions, which we are finding out are really the end product of loads and loads of money finding its way into the right hands.
Yep.
So how can that be pro-human? How could that benefit the community, the nation, humanity?
Very
It's
good
only
point.
profiting certain bloodlines, certain individuals at the lower levels, such as Sleepy Joe Biden and Hunter and the rest of the miscreants.
You got it.
Now, let me ask you this. Have you been, because there's a blackout in MSM and even independent news, they're so fixated on the 1950s, the crazy chat-coms, that they're not paying attention to the international news. And you are a fluent speaker of Putonghua. And you can thank your parents for making you go to Chinese school all those years. Are you following the news? There's these well, we call them whistleblowers, but they are just breaking down the whole bribery system between the Chinese leadership and people like the Biden family. And we were on the brink of a complete takeover using stealth that goes back to the days of imperial China. And that's really, really the risk we run by looking at these people as a bunch of idiotic chacams.
Yeah.
Or watching these Bruce Lee movies. You know, I like him, but, or better yet, the world's oldest fanboy, Quentin Tarantino,
Mhm.
right?
Well, they've been culturally truncating the whole Chinese, the breadth of our culture, the depths of our culture, and
Yeah.
deliberately keeping everyone ignorant. I mean, if you
You
talk
know who
to
they're
the
elevating? They're elevating probably the least effective group in the United States of America as gangsters. Who's that? African Americans, who are also one of the primary targets of what you're describing here.
Mhm.
There is no Chinese gangster rap. You notice that? They don't need it.
Hmm.
Better to create this genre to incarcerate these individuals and help feed the system
Hmm.
and create this culture of normlessness and violence and cruelty.
Hmm. Yeah.
Please. So you're taking the first hit by them not responding to so-called officials.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Well, the next step is, well, then you serve it, the document twice, and then the second time they go into dishonor. And once they're in dishonor, then you can find remedy in or out of court. And right now, our court system seems to be pretty shaky. So I'm actually recommending that people start creating their own court, the common law court. And a common law court is basically just a union of local people, the way it should have always been. Everything should have always been local. The enforcement officer, the sheriff, the sworn oath of office, local sheriff should be empowered and should
The
ref-
sheriff.
the local sheriff, yes, needs to be empowered and reminded that he has power over any federal police mandate.
Are you
Any,
aware of the contributions of Sheriff Richard Mack?
I'm aware, yes. And
And
thanks
so
to those local sheriffs, yes, that are coming out now.
is that what you're alluding to?
No,
There,
no, there's websites that talk about the powers of sheriff that needs to be brought to light and understood by the local people,
Mhm.
because people are confused, who's responsible for protecting me and who can enforce. Well, sheriffs have the ultimate authority.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sheriff's Handbook.
Yes. And there are, you know, different types of sheriff, and the police power, that's a whole different genre of type of enforcement. And people need to educate themselves very quickly about these things, as well as befriend your local sheriff. It's time to get your community, it's time to get to know your community.
Mhm.
And this is the other reason why um, we have been so easily suppressed, is that we've been lulled into thinking that the government takes care of everything for us, that we've gotten lazy, we've gotten ignorant, we've allowed ourselves to not interact with the people who are there to help us. And that's the local sheriff. Are you even aware of your city hall? How do you know how to navigate your way through city hall? Do you even know your city council members, your city managers, your school board trustee members? Do you
Now,
know these people?
have you been through that process yourself?
Oh, yes, I have. That's why I know. This is why I know
So
there's
this,
a huge
okay.
disconnect. That's why I know there's a disconnect. And I also know how they've been brainwashed is because I've been interacting with these leaders. And if your local sheriff is brainwashed as well, and he's serving the wrong people, he should be serving the grassroots men and women who are residents. He should not be serving any higher authority or agenda. None of this Agenda 2030, 21, sustainability, smart city program, none of that. He simply serves the men and women who reside in his scope of his, his boundaries. So it's very simple. We need to keep it very simple. So when I talk about the court, if the courts go down, don't freak out. Remember, they're dead entities. We need to create a living court. And what is common law but consists of living men and women who hold court?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very simple. And it can be easily legitimized. So it's taking back the power for ourselves, by ourselves. And these are really simple solutions. In fact, what I'm saying is actually happening. It's in America. There's Judge Anna von Reitz is creating common law courts in all 50 states. I don't
Okay,
know how
what's the name
long she's
again?
been doing this.
What's the name again, please? Say that
Anna
name
von
again.
Reitz. She's a retired judge. Reitz, Reitz, I believe.
And where is she
And
based?
she's based in the US.
Any state or?
I'm not aware of which state she's in. But you can look her up she has a website. And I
Okay.
know in Europe, because I'm in communication with a lot of the movers and shakers with this process here. And there's a movement in Europe where the people are creating their own sheriff, their own law enforcement. They're creating their own court. They're creating their own, I believe, education system. I'm not sure, but basically the law enforcement and court. And I know the education is in your wheelhouse, which would be a whole nother wonderful episode on that. But people are standing up and
One
creating.
second. We could also create our own currency, our local currency.
Absolutely.
So this whole panic about digital currency or Bitcoin is
Yep.
unnecessary.
Yep.
In fact, we should welcome it. We should welcome the collapse of giant corporations
This is a
because
shift
they're
that
illegitimate entities.
exactly.
They're dead entities, as you call them, or as it's referred to.
Mm-hmm. They're dead.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm beginning to understand the utopian potential, and it's not utopian; it's real. And you know what? It's also old school. This
It
is
is.
used to. This is how communities used to function not that long ago, before we were re-educated in the post-war period.
Yep. And the
And
one world
it went down the
government.
memory hole. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Exactly. Oh, no, 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 no. No, you get it. I mean, you see it. And I love that you see the potential, because that is exactly what you and I are doing. Is we're not here to to disseminate bad news. That's the worst thing. I will never share bad news for the sake of scaring people.
But it sells storable foods and nutraceuticals
Well,
and
that is
bug
a
out
solution,
equipment.
right?
Yeah, just burrow,
Yeah.
shelter in place.
Oh
Let
boy.
them, make them have you live like a squirrel.
Basically, what they're recommending is that you go into your corner
And that,
yourself before they corner you. It's like go
yeah,
and pre-corner yourself. That's to me is, I always tell myself, the last man standing on the battlefield is the winner. It's not how beautifully you fight the fight. If you leave the fight, you've lost. We're staying in. We're staying in to the end. We're going to be the last men and women fighting.
that's right.
That's it's simple. All right. Our solutions are simple. We're keeping it
Absolutely.
simple.
Yeah. Well, Lena, we're getting on towards the top of the hour, and I would like to leave off for now, but let's revisit some of these issues, some of these concepts. I know you have much, much more that you've been working on as well, and I can chime in here and there, but you've given us a very, very good introduction of what you're doing right now. It's all very encouraging, And I believe we're going to win this because you're talking about natural law. You're talking about metaphysical universals. They're immutable. They cannot be changed by man or woman or humankind, let's say. They can't even be engineered at the molecular, re-engineered at the molecular level. As these transhumanists and these neuroscientists, they have the hubris to try to convince us that this is ordained, but we say no. So before we leave, Ms. Pooh, Lena, give us that address again where we can access the notice of liability or confer with you and your international as well as American patriots, people who are interested in free humanity. What's that address again?
Okay. About the document itself, I just want to let your audience know that the document is a universal document, meaning that is borderless. Because we are operating as a one world government, I took opportunity of that fact and I was able to create a universal document that crosses and is able to be used in all countries, even though it's not English speaking, because the English language is an accepted language in every country as the alternate language for legal um, processes, whether it's oral or written. So therefore, if you feel you need to translate the document, no, you don't need to. You can use it, and please use it. We want all four corners covered. We want every single country served. So please, if you feel so inclined, jump on board. You're going to join a massive movement of similar awakened men and women who are reclaiming their sovereign rights and powers through the notice of liability process. So you can reach this document through the Patreon at my website called lenasfabulousfrequencies.com. Thank you, Daryl.
Lena, thank you so much. We'll be back in conversation. And we'll also be interviewing other everyday people who are engaged in this process of reclaiming our beautiful American Republic and our sovereignty and our humanity. How wonderful that is. So I'll say goodbye for now. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this program. Please make some comments down below if you like, and let us know what you'd like to hear about in the future. There's plenty of types of activity that Lena alone is engaged in that we haven't even touched upon yet. So thanks again. Thanks again, Lena. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.